Welcome to the journey. Today we have Daveda Schmidlin with us today, and so welcome, Daveda, to the journey. And just real quick, let me briefly just explain a little bit about what the journey is. And the journey is uh, an opportunity to just meet with some individuals and have a conversation about their own personal experience in life. Maybe as their life has unfolded, maybe there's been setbacks or maybe a change in direction in which they first thought they were going one way and maybe decide to go in another direction, or a combination of things that have happened in their life, opportunities or setbacks, and then maybe they decide this is the doors that have been open for me, and what did they learn along the way. We never know who's listening and what maybe peace could benefit them, give them encouragement, or give them hope. So Davida, welcome to the journey.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, not a problem. So what I always start off with is I just ask our guests, what is, if Davida's going to have fun, what do you do for fun?
Well, for fun, I enjoy spending time with my grandkids. That's always fun to me.
Okay. Okay.
um, in the summer, we do some motorcycle riding. We enjoy doing that. I don't do a lot of crazy things for fun. I'm kind of a laid back, person. It doesn't take a whole lot to for entertainment.
Sure.
We do enjoy spending a lot of time outside at the pool in the summer. Obviously, wintertime, that can't happen. But yeah, mostly I enjoy my family and just hanging out and enjoying whatever's going on in the moment.
Gotcha. And so you said grandkids. So how many grandkids do you have?
Yeah, four, two
Four.
boys and two girls.
Okay. And how old are they?
The boys are both 9, and
Okay.
the girls are 6 and 5.
Okay. Gotcha. And then how many children do you have?
I have 3 sons.
Three sons. Okay. And how
Yeah.
and what are their ages, and then how and do they live nearby, or?
They're 8. Well, my oldest son is 29. So there's 29, 23, and 21.
Okay.
And unfortunately, my oldest 2 sons moved back to Ohio, which is where we're originally from. We're currently in the Rockford area, but we're from Ohio.
Okay.
So the only one left is the youngest, who is 21.
Okay.
But yeah, they're grown and kind of doing their own thing. So
Sure, sure. Now, where in Ohio now you're born and raised in Ohio?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And where in Ohio?
We were Northwest Ohio, a little bit outside of the Toledo area, so we're very close to the Ohio-Michigan border.
Okay, gotcha. So what brought you, I'm assuming you and your husband
Hmm.
came over from Ohio, and what brought you to Rockford?
Yeah, it was 16 years ago. He was
Oh,
transferred for his job,
okay. Gotcha. Okay.
so that's what brought us here.
Okay. All right. And is still with the same company now after
Yes,
the okay.
yes.
Well,
8 more years.
yeah. Not that anyone's counting, right?
No, not at all.
Gotcha. So when you were in Ohio, tell us a little bit about when you were in high school there and college, and what were you kind of into when you were a young person? What did you do for not just fun, but what did you do, extracurricular activities, if you had any?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. When I was younger, I wasn't involved in anything very good. I had a really dysfunctional childhood, a lot of emotional trauma, a lot of dysfunction. So that followed me into my teenage years, and I actually became a mom at 16.
Mm,
So that's what I was doing. I didn't go to college. However, in my 20s, I did go to Bible college. After I pulled myself together and realized that wasn't the life I wanted to live. So when I was younger, my extracurricular activities probably aren't a lot of stories that I want to share on air. A lot of mistakes going on back then.
sure, sure. And again, definitely we won't have to get into the stories because you never know if your grandkids are going to be listening, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
but I do think, though, regardless of what it may be, I think you said something that I think is so important, is that you made a comment about, because of some things that were going on in your family of origin, you found yourself making choices. Um, you're making some different choices, either because of either reacting or responding to that, or because maybe there wasn't the same kind of guidance that maybe you were able to provide for your kids. Whatever those reasons may have been. But now at our age, we can sit back and we can then look at that maybe more objectively, right? And
Oh, for sure. Yes.
look at that as not, almost like, kind of like, like in A Christmas Carol, right? Of looking back into our past and seeing it from a little bit more objective perspective. And I think that in itself is, when I'm working with clients, I try to invite them into that process, because so many times we still, in our 50s, 40s, and 50s, we still keep the shame that we may have experienced as a teenager, if we don't look at it like, step back and objectively look at it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't carry any shame. Like I don't carry any shame. I'm a completely different person
Yep.
today than I was back then. And while I won't say that my experiences were enjoyable, I do think that sometimes they are, like your trauma and your emotional stuff, it can be a prerequisite for where you're going, and it can teach you,
Yep.
if you allow it to. It can teach you about yourself, it can teach you about the world, it can teach you to have compassion for other people. So there's so many lessons in that once I was able to move through that and kind of tap into mostly what I believed about myself because of the things that had happened, and was able to really kind of see more truth in that area and realize that I am enough, I am good enough, I don't have to be who other people want me to be, just because being raised up, just because other people's woundings or traumas cause them to behave in a certain way, that doesn't have anything to do with my identity as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to like navigate through all of that has really helped me, like I said, have, I think, more compassion for other people and be able to see people and the world and even myself through that forgiving and graceful lens, which I may not have had I not gone through all of those things. Not that I'm excited that I went through them, but it
Right.
can be, you can use it as a positive if you choose to.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when we are able to kind of step back and in that space of looking at it just for, I use the word objectively, or looking at it more factually about what happened, we can look at things and going, okay, I can see why the 15-year-old Kevin made that choice, because he was looking for, whatever it was he was looking for, right? And the 15-year-old Kevin didn't know how to do it differently at the time, or thought this was the best choice at the time, or I was willing to risk what I may get for it versus the consequences, whatever that may be. And if I do that at 50, I can then recognize, like you said, have more empathy for him, and then be able to have more empathy for someone I may be encountering, and also know that that may be a path that they have to follow on their own journey. Meaning they have to look at and unpack that, and just look at, okay, this already happened, so what can we learn about it that resonates now?
Right, right. Yeah, I think there's always a lesson there
Mhm.
when you can see it that way, and when you can give yourself some grace for where you were in that moment. And the reality is we're all really doing the best that we can with what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, back in that moment, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. Coming from my perspective today, if you would have asked me back then, I wouldn't have been able to tell you these things. But I felt very unvalidated as a person. And so I was really looking for validation. I was looking to belong. I was looking to have that need to be loved and accepted for who I was. And I didn't know how to find those things in a healthy way. So I just tried to find them in the only way that I could figure out. And at that time, did the best I could with what I had to work with,
Sure.
really.
Well, and I think, we I think sometimes we want, usually out of fear, right? We want for
Hmm.
our kids, and I don't have any grandkids. My kids are 24 and 22, and so I want my kids, to be safe and make good choices for them and those things. And but recognizing that sometimes finding out what the good choices are for them may very well come from you know t- making a choice that at first I'd be like, ooh, I don't know, but they need to find out for themselves. They need
Hmm.
to experience that for themselves, and just hopefully there won't be too much long-term impact, when they make those choices. So
Right.
so you had mentioned that you had, at a young age, became pregnant, had your oldest son, right? Your 29-year
Hmm.
old, okay.
Yes.
And then obviously you went through the whole process of, taking care of him and raising him. And then when you were in your early 20s, you said you went back to school, or went to school.
Yes. Yes.
And in particular, it was you said a Bible college.
Yes.
And what school was that?
It was Hartford the Nations in Genoa, Ohio. That's
Okay.
one of the places that they have a school. And I think I had faith since I was little, but I just really wasn't following any kind of faith. I was sort of doing my own thing. And in my early 20s, I was, introduced to the church. And I think looking back at the time, I thought, oh, even though I'd come a really long way in my journey, I think I felt like I was going to fix myself, right? Like
Mhm.
I was gonna fix everything
Yeah.
because I could do all the right things, which was kind of what I felt I needed to do. And in all of that, that took me on a whole nother journey of, you know, a lot of good came out of it. Like there was a lot of really good that came out of it, but there was also, for me, a lot of, I think, like inner struggle that came out of that as well, because you can't always do the right thing and you can't fix yourself by crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And so there was always a lot of self-condemnation for me in that journey, and trying to live up to what I thought was the standard, which really now I look back and I realize that it was other people's standards and expectations that I was trying to live up to. And so even though like that journey was really great in a lot of ways, there was also a lot of heartache that came along with that, and lessons to be learned in that as well. But it has all brought me to where I am today. And so we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always progressing, and just, that's the journey, the whole idea of your podcast, right? Like just kind of taking
Yep.
that journey and letting it guide you. And I think that for me, that was kind of why I got stuck, was because I felt like I wasn't really allowed to trust my own intuition and let it guide me, because I had to stay within this very safe box of what was, safe and what was looked at as, appropriate. And so it was kind of a transition. So I go through all this stuff, finally realize like I can't fix myself, and quite frankly, like I'm not broken. I didn't really need fixing. I just really needed to find the authentic version of me that I could trust.
Mhm.
And so in that, that journey has kind of, took me to where I was in ministry for over 20 years. And then I exited from like a formal ministry setting, and I started to do more traveling and speaking. And I went from there into, just kind of wanting to work with people more one-on-one and doing life coaching. And so it's just been like a constant evolvement. And I'm sure the next 10 years will, take me even farther on that journey. But it was a very good experience. And yet at the same time, there was also some heartache in that. But one thing I've learned is that you can have both. Like, I feel like sometimes we have this idea that it has to be one or the other, that you have to either have, all joy and everything's really good, or you're in this place of heartache and struggle. And I just think the reality of life is that most days we have a little of both. And it's very freeing to like realize that that's okay, that you can have all the emotions and all the things, and that we're capable of handling them all and processing them all, and we don't have to choose between one or the other. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that was that was kind of like that long time period. Obviously, there's a lot more, detail in there, but that was kind of where I went from going to Bible college, having that experience in the church, and then kind of growing and evolving beyond what I was learning, and learning to really trust myself to move forward into what felt right and authentic to me.
Yeah. That part of your journey reminds me a lot of some very similar experiences that I had. A little bit different. I was raised in a Lutheran home. Went to church every Sunday, and kind of maybe similar to yourself. I have no memory, and I have memories that go back to being 3 years old, and I have no memories of not feeling that I knew who Jesus was. Never. I always remember, and then later the stories that I was told later, but I always remember that sense of that presence, that sense of that is along my entire life, right? And then uh, but I remember I had a youth director that brought us to different churches so that we could check out different churches, and that was the first time that I saw church differently than the stand up, sit down, sing this hymn at this certain time, or the Apostles' Creed at this certain time, and that was attractive. And then probably the next big event that happened, I remember I was 18 years old, and a friend of mine invited me on a Sunday morning to go and watch him get baptized. And I had no idea what he was talking about, because in my world, you only got baptized as a baby. I had no idea why was he. I didn't get it. I didn't understand. But he was a friend, so I said yes, and I went. And after the sermon message was done, I was talking to him, getting ready for the next piece, and the pastor asked me if I wanted to get baptized. And because I was going to see a guy who was going to train me for the Mr. USA, I was a bodybuilder back then. I said no, because I didn't want to go to that meeting with wet hair. But as he turned and left, I felt this strong sense of I should stop him, because I should do this right now. And so I ended up making a decision, and it was like not an epiphany is not the right word, but it was definitely a spiritual shift and awakening. And along with the next probably 6 months to the next probably at least 18 months of pretty intense, heavily involved with an Assemblies of God Church, which was much different than the Lutheran church that I had been familiar with. And that was instrumental in my next level of development spiritually. That was very critical, especially at that time period in my life. And then a couple years later, I noticed that the rules that had given me such structure now seemed, I couldn't help but see the gray that wasn't fitting in the black and white world that was being painted for me. Like grace seems, love and grace seem to be grayish more than black and white. And I struggled with, those seemed to be fundamentally teaching points of the main character that everyone was talking about. They seemed to be fundamental to that, and I couldn't not see it gray anymore. And I recognize with with a lot of questioning and people making comments and predictions about my future, I knew that I had to leave and move on to the next part of the journey. But and that was hard because maybe similar to what you experienced, that was hard because I joke and say I'm a recovering people pleaser, but sometimes it's not so recovering. so so
Yes, I can relate to that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because
oh, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
no, go no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I had a similar experience. I know that I have had an awareness of God, of Jesus. I mean, ever since I was small. I don't remember like an exact moment when it happened, but I know I've always had it. But when I first started going to church, uh, I plugged in right away, and I remember filling out my application to like serve in the nursery. My kids were small at the time, and one of the questions was, when did you get saved? And I remember writing down, I'm not sure, do I need to take a class for that or something? Like, I don't really know what you mean by that. And so, I plugged in there, and then, a lot of really good came out of that. A solid foundation in my faith, a passion for people, wanting to help people, seeing more worth and value in myself. But then, like you said, it all became gray, and there were certain things that just weren't feeling right to me. Just my intuition, my spirit. But for a long time, I didn't trust myself enough because they're the pastor, they're the leaders, they should know better than me, right? Like, who am I? I'm just this young girl with, 3 little kids, and what do I know? And so it took me a really long time to find the confidence and the boldness to actually ponder my own thoughts and what I was thinking. And like you said, that transition, when you feel it so deep down inside of you, you just know that you have to go. For me, I explain it like I felt like I was being suffocated. I couldn't have my own thoughts. I couldn't have my own opinions. Even a little bit like with, like preaching and teaching, I started to feel as though it was the only space where you do that. And the purpose for other people listening often felt like it was simply to point out where they thought you were wrong. And so like that was kind of my experience. Not always, but often enough that it was really impacting me and affecting me, where I felt like I didn't have the freedom to be myself and speak my own truth in what I was learning, and where I felt like I was being led. And so I felt that deep, like what you were talking about, like you just know that I have to go. It's time for me to transition. And that was hard because there's other people involved. And when you have spent a good portion of years building relationships and connecting with people, and you're very submerged in that world and that's your life, and then you decide that you have to move on, not everyone is going to be supportive of your growth. And unfortunately, often those are people that you held very dear in your heart, that you expected to support your growth and be happy for you, and they're not. And not only are they not happy for you, but they're now condemning you and telling you that you're backslidden and you better watch yourself because you're going down the wrong path. And so it's really hard because it's like you have to follow self. You have to follow, what you're being guided to do. But then there's also this grieving for what you're leaving behind, because those people mattered to you. So you're leaving with excitement for the future and where you're going. And then you're also leaving with some hurt and some grief over relationships that are now ending simply because you felt led to grow maybe in a different direction than someone else. And so that was really difficult. That was a really difficult part of the journey for me. And it actually took me a couple years, I think, to really, heal from that and be able to, move forward and feel comfortable pursuing new relationships. Because now I have this fear of like, well, if I get too close to people, I'm going to get hurt. They're going to judge me as soon as I grow. And I know I'm going to grow. Like, I've just accepted that. Like, you're going to keep growing. You're never going to stay right where you are forever. So it took me a good 2 years to process all of that and to really heal and feel comfortable moving forward and welcoming those relationships and new people into my life and into my heart, and just had to kind of come to terms with, if I get hurt moving forward, which I probably will at some point, right? It'll happen. But now I know I'm strong enough in who I am, and I'm strong enough to see it for what it is, and I'm strong enough to have it or handle it. I'd rather have the relationship and the experience and learn and grow from each other, and have an open heart to people than to close myself off and think I'm protecting myself from being hurt, but really just shutting yourself off from anything good too. So
Sure.
that was, yeah.
So just and I know these are some of those questions that, and again, if you don't have a specific answer, like, right, then I'm very okay as we just talk through it, right? But, many times you'll hear people talk about or hear it in referenced in a book or in some teaching or whatever about finding your own voice, or I think you referred to it as listening to your own voice, right? And so and that seems to, on one hand it seems a little woo woo, and on the other hand, it's like, okay, so what does that look like? What does that look like for Davida to hear your own voice and be able to differentiate between our own voice, that intuition, that God space that's within us, versus the 15-year-old who's making choices based upon just trying to figure out how to get some needs met, right? How because that's what people will say, will refer to as backsliding, right? If you're listening to the 15-year-old, then you're that's how you backslide. And it's like, so how do we differentiate? Because how does Davida differentiate?
Well, I think for me, like listening to my own voice, what you said about like having that God space inside of you. So my old faith paradigm, if that's what you want to call it, was more looking for this external source that I really couldn't fully understand. It was always a question of, did God say this? Did God, like there's always, well, God said this. And so for me, listening to my own voice and trusting my own intuition is acknowledging that there is a oneness with the divine, and that is part of who I am. It's part of me. It lives inside of me, and I can trust that guidance, even if it's different from what I'm getting from other opinions or the outside world or someone else's belief. I don't have to subscribe to what someone else believes and lives by in their life if it doesn't feel authentic to me. And just really coming to terms with that's okay. You're never going to please all the people all the time. And it's okay for you to take up your own space and be your own person and be authentic to where you feel you're being led. And I really did. I mean, and when I said like backsliding, for me, that kind of looked like people assuming that because I was going in a different direction, that I was no longer hearing from God, that I was no longer being led by, anything divine. I was being led by the flesh and, being selfish and heading in the wrong direction. And in all reality, I was really following what that space inside of me, where that was leading me and taking me. And so like for me, like listening to your own voice, being able to trust your own intuition, it really is a matter of learning to trust who you are, who God created you to be, and trusting that you do hear guidance and direction from the divine, and you don't need anyone else's permission or approval to follow that.
It's interesting, as we were talking about that, both of us having some similarities in our stories of trying to figure things out, trying to make things up as we were going along, trying to piece it all together, right? And probably survive is probably a little bit of exaggerating and stretching it a little bit, but trying to get our own, as we're making this up, trying to get our own needs met. Then we become or get involved with a particular group that has a set of guidelines, has a set of rules. Of course, then it's also, at least for me, the thing that really felt and empowering is not the right word. Felt like I was going in the right direction was because it did bring me closer to God. It did open up certain pathways, and so, but at some point, I was doing the people pleasing that I was doing before, or trying to please others to get my own needs met before. I switched over to try to make sure that I was getting this group of people's approval as well. It just is that I just switched the other end of the continuum. I just went from, they were both flesh. They were both, just one used verbiage that was religious, but it still was. I was still more concerned about please. I was more concerned about not having them upset with me than I already knew that God was okay with me, but it was this translation that was throwing me off. And it sounds like there was some similarity that you were talking about, because the rejection, when you're not following that rule for whatever reason, causes people to become upset or concerned or fearful. Then the message is that then we're being rejected. And I think that part of being able to kind of, I think, idea of hearing our voice as we are learning to, uh, trying to learn how to differentiate between the part of us that want approval of others versus trying to, uh, listen to the voice of intuition, listen to God's voice that speaks to us when we're grounded, when we're in that quiet space. Um, so if there was anything for the ones that are listening, what are some things that kind of allow Davida to know that you're listening? Like, how do you know when you're listening to that voice of your voice, the voice of intuition?
Well, I think first of all, that is something that you have to grow into, especially if you're coming from a space where you are very much a people pleaser. And I mean, I'm right there with you. I think I had the crown for people pleasing. Like that was my, that, I mean, I had to have other people's approval in everything. And if I didn't, then I questioned and, doubted myself, and I wanted to make them happy. But the discomfort of not being true to yourself and making your own self happy and following, just really being who you are catches up with you. And so I think, to answer your question, I think you have to grow into that space of feeling confident enough to follow what feels like it brings peace to you, what feels right to you, and also being able to eliminate, or at least be able to push past. I don't think we ever truly eliminate fear. We will feel fear, but sometimes we have to, being uncomfortable. But also, like, being able to shift past that and not being afraid to make a mistake, not being afraid to explore something that, to move you in a forward direction. Because for me, a lot of what made me afraid to explore or to even really examine my own thoughts that were kind of outside of the box was this notion that you're going to get it wrong, and you're just going to be, caught up in this web of lies and evil, and it's going to take you down this terrible, to this terrible place. And so when I was able to process through that fear and realize that I am one with God, there's no, like, that's not going to change. No one can take that away from me. God's not leaving. And if I take a step, I'm not going to get it wrong. I'm either going to learn something or I'm going to grow. And so there really is no wrong. And so I think for me, and what I would say to other people is, you can trust that, if something doesn't feel right to you, if you feel like you're in a space where you can't breathe and you're wanting to move forward, there's no guilt and shame attached to outgrowing what your normal is now, even if other people aren't ready to go with you. So I think that, you have to, like, learn to trust your own guidance on the inside. And I don't really know how to put that into other words, except for follow that intuition, follow where you feel like you're being led. And a lot of times I think that speaks to us through maybe, a book or a message or something that we hear that's a little bit outside the norm. And it kind of piques our interest, but then we have this fear over here on the other side to look into it or explore it because of everything we've been told or everything we've been taught about what shouldn't be or where you shouldn't go or what you shouldn't listen to or who you shouldn't listen to or, what kinds of books to stay away from or what kind of teachings to stay away from. But sometimes if something catches your interest, you have to trust yourself enough to explore it. And it's either going to be something or it's not. And it's okay to follow that and to trust where it takes you, either to the left or to the right or straight forward. It's going to take you somewhere. And it's okay to trust that. And it's okay to explore your own faith and your own thoughts and your own passions and feelings. I hope that answers the question.
No, and I think, and again, kind of like how I started with this question was just really more about having just a discussion about it, and I think I think at different times as we evolve in our own growth, aspect, there's different things that we may have to make decisions about, and I think of some time periods when it's like, okay, when does Kevin's tendencies to say yes and his tendency is to not to say no when it comes to helping someone or doing something, because before it was about Kevin and he didn't help other people. So I had so I found myself in this position of going, okay, doing the opposite. I had my own personal agenda of what I needed to do to meet Kevin's needs or whatever, and then, okay, how do I get outside of that, which was then to say yes more than no. And now I find myself in a space of going, how to discern what to say no to, so I can say the correct yes to something. And because it's no longer about, is it, it's the choices are about yes I can. It becomes more complicated, or I complicate it more because if I get asked to be on 4 different boards, they all are good causes. I can't say yes to all of them if I want to be effective on any of them.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes it's and that's why I would just want to throw out to anybody that's listening, is that if my tendency is to say yes, why is that? And take a look at that, because maybe it's more uncomfortable for me to say no, and that may be the growth opportunity. Or if every part of me wants to say no because I'm fearful of it not working out or making a mistake, like you were talking about, maybe this is where I need to step in with courage to say yes, as we're getting to learn about ourselves, and getting to learn about that, how to hear our own voice or intuition.
Yeah, so for me, I think that a lot of, not that I don't ever get it wrong or occasionally struggle with the when to say yes, when to say no, because I do, but I feel like for me, what has made that much more clear is having a clear vision and having a clear understanding of where I'm going and where I feel like I'm being led, and what plugs into that, and how because if I like you said, if you say yes to everything, you're not going to do anything extremely well. And so to be able to serve people and to be able to show up for people in your best capacity at 100%, we have to pick and choose, what we're going to say yes to. And so for me, a lot of my gauge on that is, does this plug into the overall vision for what I'm doing and how I help people, and can I really show up here and give 100%? And then there's other things that that come up, and it's like that it doesn't quite fit, and so then I know that it doesn't quite fit like my passion and my purpose and the road that I feel like God has me on. And so those are the things that I've learned to say no to. And key is to be able to say no to it and not feel guilty about it, because you realize that saying no to this over here means that you can give 100% yes someplace else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that sometimes those natural feelings of guilt that we might have disappointed someone, because they're going to be disappointed that we say no, it's okay. That doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. It just means that that's that's that is the consequence of the decision you made. It still may be the right decision, just because someone's disappointed. So, um, so,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so Davida, let me ask. So what now? You've talked about that you're doing some one-on-one coaching now, some life coaching right now.
Yeah, I actually have a program that I do. It's I have like an online course that people can go through, and there's some group coaching involved with that. I do have some one-on-one coaching that I do, primarily group coaching, and then that evolved out of the book that I released, just in kind of helping people. I'm very passionate about helping people kind of find those root causes of where the false beliefs have come from, that they tend to live in, that keeps them from really exploring the life that they want to live, from being happy to constantly living in that self-doubt, imposter syndrome, like, wearing the crown for imposter syndrome. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm really passionate about helping women with. A lot of the women that I work with are entrepreneurs, not all of them, but to me, being an entrepreneur, having your own business, it is 70% about personal growth, self-development, really being comfortable with who you are, and 30% about skill and, knowing how to grow a business. And so I take a bottom-up approach with people. I feel like, we have to like go from what those blocks are, maybe even subconsciously. I know for me, there was a subconscious belief that I picked up early in childhood that I wasn't good enough. And I didn't realize until in my 40s how much that was still affecting my decisions, my growth, my choices, stopping myself from moving forward. A lot of people call it self-sabotage, but I think it's really just patterns that we developed in our younger years to keep us safe and protect us from feeling like a failure or feeling like we're not good enough, but we carry that with us throughout life. And so those are,
About regarding the piece of when you're able to do the classes, or do the groups, and really about kind of helping specifically women entrepreneurs kind of navigate through that through that process of looking at uh, identifying maybe old messages from old impressions that happened when a person's younger, that may still be manifesting themselves into their adult world.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so let me add what well, first of all, what's the name of your book? And so we'll start there.
Yeah, the book is called Unraveled. It's unraveling the beliefs that hold you back and learning to love the real you. And the book was really, I mean, it was me wanting to be very vulnerable with the world, which I think I say that out loud and I'm like, why? But it was because I feel like, I talk about some pretty significant things. I talk a little bit about sexual abuse in there. I talk a little bit about being told to, keep quiet, not tell. I talk a little bit about my church experience. I talk about a couple of things that happened with my kids. And the reason I wanted to put that out in the world is because I feel like when you are real and open and raw and honest about your experiences and how you have navigated them and how you have explored them and come out on the other side, and you share that, that's what really helps people grow, because one, they don't feel alone. Anybody that can relate to that, and you don't have to have something major to have, these hidden things, like that are still kind of there. It could be something as simple as, the way that a parent responded to you repeatedly when you did something that could have made you feel one side or the other, that either you needed to perform really, really well, or that you were never good. Like there's just these things that we pick up and we adopt these beliefs about ourselves that we carry with us. And so I feel like when you're willing to share the things you've been through, it helps other people not feel alone and navigate that space for themselves more easily. I mean, we need community. We have to be able to co-regulate. You know, we got to be able to self-regulate, but we also need to be able to co-regulate with other people and feel like someone understands us, and that this thing over here that we're feeling, that we're not broken and we're not alone, that it's a normal part of the human process. And so that was really why I wrote the book. I wanted to encourage other women to not give up and to not quit and to not be identified by the events that have happened in their life, and to be courageous enough to explore those places that hurt and, quite frankly, really suck to go through. Like, there's nothing fun. There's nothing fun about, visiting some of those places, but the freedom on the other side is well worth it. And so that's what I'm very passionate about helping people with.
Gotcha. Well, your book definitely sounds very similar to when I talk about the hero's journey and talking about addressing those dragons or those demons or those messages that we have continued to manifest in our life today, because they don't go away until we address them, because they're within us, and we're the ones who continue to resurrect them. I mean, granted, we may have to leave situations or leave relationships or whatever it may be. I'm not to imply that, there are bad things that have happened. There are abusive situations, abusive people. Definitely, we have to do those things for safety from that aspect of it. But unfortunately, in those abusive situations, the message that we carry with us, even when we've gotten out of the scenario, it causes just as much pain as it was when we're in there. And so I think in the name of the book is Unraveling, right?
Yeah, Unraveled. Yep.
Unraveled.
Yep, Unraveled.
Unraveled.
Yes.
And then you also have a website in which people can contact you at?
Yeah, well, my website is actually currently under construction at this moment. It's being rebuilt, but it is DavedaSchmidlin.com, so it will be active again soon. But I am active on Facebook and Instagram, active on social media, and that's really the best place to connect or to find me or to learn more or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay. So then if people did want to get a hold of you, they could get a hold of you through either Facebook or Instagram, and then they get contact information from you there, and either do some one-on-one or do some group coaching, or get your book, and then kind of doing some either self-exploration or with a little bit of coaching you can do as well.
Yeah, and the book is available on Amazon. So you can get the book on Amazon also. That's actually the best and only place to get it right now. I don't sell those through my website, so I just let Amazon take care of that for me.
There you go, perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
But you can get it there. And yes, I will be launching another round of the course coming in January, but I do have a waiting list for that. And I always get really excited when it's coming up, because for me, that just fulfills my purpose in helping other people make those connections, and to see people, I just had one of my girls say to me last week, these are the kinds of things that just make me really happy and excited and know that this is the right path for me. Is, we had gone through some coaching. There were some things that were revealed that she was kind of like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought about that. And this is really about guiding other people to be their own hero, right? I'm not doing this for them. I'm just guiding them, to finding their own truth. And she comes back the next week and she's like, I stood up for myself this week and I didn't even think twice about it. And it just felt so natural. And I didn't feel guilty afterwards like I would have. And I'm like, bam, right? It's those kinds of things are what bring me so much joy, because having been there and lived in that age of not being able to, have your own voice or speak up for yourself, or feeling it was wrong to do so. That's just one tiny little, example, but those are the kinds of things that we see happening.
Nice. So, just for someone who may not have ever participated in something like this, so the book is one aspect of some self exploring, but then the workshop piece of it becoming part of that. So then it's for so many weeks. Is that how you roll it out? You sign up for it, and it's for so many weeks.
Yeah. So coming up, there will be like an initial launch where we'll go through the course. That takes 12 weeks, but then we kind of extend that out over a 6 month period because I mean transformation takes time. I mean we do sometimes have like these big revelation moments that it's like boom, something changes. But learning to navigate how to when you see those old patterns, learning how to navigate those, how to recognize them when they come up in the future, and they will because they've been there for so long. It's a process to learn how to walk through that. And I don't know that we ever 100% get rid of it all the time, but it starts to come up less and less. It gets less overpowering. We recognize it faster. It has less of an impact on us, and that doesn't happen overnight or in 2 or 3 weeks. So it's actually a 6 month process where we work together, but it takes 12 weeks to go through like the workshop part. And then we continue to work together for 3 more months. Whatever comes up in your life, if you get stuck, just to have that support. And the group coaching is amazing because not only do you have coaching, me doing coaching, but then there's also this aspect of community and co-regulation with other people who are on a similar journey. They're walking out their own journey, but it's a similar journey of growth. And so, having that community to do it with is very powerful and impactful.
Absolutely, and I have not only experienced that along with my own personal journey, but also experienced that as I facilitate one-time workshops, but also facilitate ongoing group work. So I can
Yes.
definitely I can definitely speak for that too and endorse that as well. And there is something about, yeah, I was the last person in the world that ever wanted to do a retreat or a group, because it's really hard to keep secrets when you do that. But I it was by far the most powerful thing that I could have done and the most useful thing for me. Again, going back to that trusting that voice is because it's the last thing I wanted to do, because I knew that it was risking what I perceived as emotional safety. Um, but really what I was trying to avoid, as Brene Brown would say, is I was trying to avoid being vulnerable, and vulnerability is exactly where I needed to go, and had the courage to do that. So, Davida, thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on the podcast, on the journey today, and sharing a little bit about your story and a little bit about uh, your aspect of even in your adult life, how you had to navigate through, as you were outgrowing a particular group of people that were helpful for one time period, but you had to listen to that your own intuition and listen to God, as you were navigating through that. And thank you for obviously what you're doing for the women that and the people who read your book, as well as the women that come to your class and your workshop. If we were getting ready to as we're wrapping up, if there was something that you wanted to share with the people that are listening, what would be one thing you'd want to share with them?
I think just something really simple, which is just keep going. Like keep going. Don't stop exploring. Don't stop growing. If you find yourself stuck, step out and just do something. Like take a step, do something. Because I feel like the only time that we're not moving forward, that we're not progressing, is when we just quit. We don't keep going. We just kind of stop. We get stuck. We get scared. But do something. Always just keep walking, keep moving, keep going. And when you look, you might not see it in the moment, but when you look back, you're 5 years, 2 years, and that you've kept going the whole time, and you've never like just given up on exploring because it hurt or whatever. You'll see your growth there. And so I think just keep going, and don't be afraid to do something good for you. Like it's okay to put yourself first. It's okay to, it's okay to look into those places and do some work on you. It's not always about everybody else. And when you put yourself first, you're better able to give to others.
Absolutely. Definitely well said. So, Davida, for anyone listening, we can look up Davida Schmidlin on Facebook or Instagram, and then soon, assuming after the first of the year, you'll be looking for davidaschmidlin.com on
Yes.
your website, and Unraveled um,
Unravel.
on Amazon as well. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
perfect. Well, Davida, thank you very much for being with us, and you be safe and be well, and keep doing the good work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun. I've enjoyed it very much.
Good deal. All right, thank you. And for anyone, as we're getting ready to sign off today, thank you very much for being with us. And again, these steps of personal growth, it does take effort. It's not just the things that we want to change. It's also taking effort to physically, we talk about self-care a lot, but then also being able to push through those emotional and mental barriers as well. And doing a workshop or a class such as Davida is offering is one of those steps that we can do that. Thank you very much, and be well, and we'll see you again soon.